In a world where ancient legends breathe beneath the veil of time, a hero's journey awakens once more. But this is no ordinary tale of strength and valor. This is the story of Heracles, reimagined through the lens of faith, where divine purpose and mortal courage collide in a battle against encroaching darkness. 12 impossible trials await him, not merely tests of might, but of spirit, of heart, and of unwavering faith. Each challenge pushes him beyond the limits of human endurance, revealing a path of redemption woven with divine light. As shadows rise and evil threatens to consume the world, Heracles must wield not just the power of his hands, but the strength of his soul. Step into a saga where myth meets the sacred, where heroic deeds echo the eternal struggle between light and shadow. Prepare to journey through a realm where every labor becomes a testament to faith, hope, and the unbreakable spirit of a true warrior. Welcome to the 12 Labors of Heracles, Faith Against Darkness. Your epic adventure begins now. Chapter 1. The Fall of the Mighty. In the twilight of a broken world, when the fires of truth had dimmed and the temples of false gods gleamed with deceit, a child was born beneath a sky veiled in storm. His name would echo through eternity, Heracles. His mother, Alcmene, wept as thunder rolled above the hills, for she knew her son was not like others. There was something in his eyes, ancient and fierce, as if heaven itself had breathed into him a shard of divine will. The priests muttered of omens. The stars shifted in uneasy silence. And though men would sing of his strength, it was not his might that would shape history, but his fall. Heracles grew as a lion among sheep. Before he had come of age, he wrestled serpents in his cradle, shattered spears in training yards, and hunted monsters for sport. Kingdoms feared his name, and warlords offered gold for his allegiance. Yet beneath the sinew and storm, pride rooted itself deep in his soul, quiet, patient, venomous. He became a man praised more than prayed for. His victories were many, but his humility was few. He had not yet learned that true power comes not from the body, but from surrender. The day came when that pride was tested and found wanting. It began with a banquet in the halls of Thebes. There was wine, there was laughter, there were voices of flatterers and fools. And in that hour, something dark stirred. A spirit of madness, unseen, slipped into the heart of the hero. His mind clouded, his hands trembled, and before the night had passed, his strength, that glorious, fabled strength, had been turned against those he loved most. When dawn came, Heracles awoke to silence. The feast hall was a ruin. The laughter had turned to echoes. The eyes of the city, once filled with admiration, now watched him in horror. He had committed the unthinkable. His own family, slain by his own hands. And so he fled, into the wilderness, into ash and shadow. For days he wandered, barefoot and broken, his soul gnawed by guilt, his cries lost to the wind. He cast aside his weapons. He tore his cloak. He cursed the heavens, then begged them for mercy. He saw no redemption, only ruin. Then, upon the 13th dawn, as the mists clung to the rocks like ghostly fingers, a figure emerged from the hills. An old man, wrapped in robes of white, bearing a staff of gnarled olive wood and a scroll sealed thrice with crimson wax. His voice was like a mountain breeze, gentle yet unyielding. "Heracles, son of Alcmene," he said, "the Lord has heard your lament. You have sinned, yes, and grievously. But our God is not the God of vengeance alone. He is the God of mercy, whose heart longs for the return of the lost." Heracles collapsed to his knees. "Then tell me," he whispered, "what must I do to be clean again?" The prophet unsealed the scroll and spoke, not as a man, but as a herald of something far greater. 12 labors shall you endure, 12 trials, not of blood and bone alone, but of heart and spirit. For you are not called to reclaim glory, but to seek grace. These beasts you shall face are not mere creatures of flesh. They are sin's given form, the great tempters of mankind. Each one you conquer will not only heal your soul, but shatter a stronghold of darkness. And the first was named the Lion of Nemea, a beast cloaked in golden fur, its hide impenetrable, its roar like thunder. It devoured not only flesh, but souls, feeding on the pride of kings and the arrogance of fools. No weapon could harm it. No army could cage it. And Heracles would face it alone. So the journey began. No fanfare, no soldiers, no golden chariot. Only a man, burdened with regret, walking into the unknown with bare hands and a prayer on his lips. Each step was a penance. Each mile a hymn. He passed ruined altars and shattered idols, the remains of a world that had forgotten the true God. Night fell. The stars blinked above, as if heaven watched with bated breath. In a valley ahead, the ground bore claw marks as deep as graves. The trees were split. The silence screamed. And there, in the shadows, eyes like molten gold stared back. The lion had come, but Heracles did not reach for a sword. Instead, he knelt, whispered a psalm, and rose with nothing but his hands and his hope. And the heavens, for the first time in an age, smiled upon him. For the mighty had fallen, but the fallen had chosen to rise. Chapter 2. The Lion of Pride. The Valley of Nemea was a cursed place, a land where no birds sang, no flowers bloomed, and even the wind dared not linger. The villagers who once tilled its fertile fields had long since fled, their homes swallowed by ivy and silence. For in the hills prowled a terror no blade could pierce, no trap could bind. The lion, cloaked in divine arrogance, ruled there, not as an animal, but as a judgment. And into that valley walked a broken man. Heracles, once lauded as the champion of Thebes, now walked alone, barefoot and humbled. His strength remained, yet it bore no crown. His heart was heavy with repentance, and his soul still bore the wounds of his fall. He came not as a conqueror, but as a penitent, not with armor or spear, but clothed in sackcloth and prayer. He paused at the edge of a ruined vineyard, where a crumbling statue of a false god lay shattered in the weeds. He looked upon it, not with contempt, but with sorrow. "Pride made gods of men," he whispered. "Let humility make a man of me." And the lion roared. The sound thundered through the mountains, shaking dust from ancient stones. It was not the roar of an animal, but of something far older, a voice that mocked humility and fed on fear. Trees splintered. The earth trembled. And Heracles knew the trial had begun. He followed the sound into a dark ravine, where light barely touched the floor. The rocks here were jagged, like the teeth of giants. And there, crouched in the gloom, the lion waited. Its golden mane glowed faintly in the shadows, as if lit from within. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence, no, with judgment. This was no ordinary beast. This was pride incarnate. Its breath was hot with disdain. Its claws had torn down temples, and its jaws had silenced prophets. Heracles stepped forward. The lion lunged. The ground shook as they clashed, not as man and beast, but as sin and soul. Heracles wrestled the creature, but his blows glanced off its hide as if it were stone. Swords would have shattered. Arrows would have snapped. The lion was invulnerable, clothed in the same arrogance that once ruled Heracles' own heart. And the hero faltered. The lion pinned him, snarling with a grin that mirrored Heracles' own face from years past. Proud, invincible, untouchable. It was not trying to kill him. It was trying to convert him, to remind him of the glory he had once worshipped, to tempt him back into the self-made throne. But Heracles, though wounded, did not yield. With his last breath, he cried out, not for power but for grace. "God of mercy," he gasped, "if pride cannot be slain by strength, let it be broken by surrender." And in that moment, something shifted. The lion's claws pierced flesh, but Heracles did not resist. He embraced the pain. He clung not to his might, but to his repentance. And slowly, the beast began to struggle, not against Heracles' arms, but against something unseen. Light descended, a light not of the sun, but of heaven. The lion thrashed, roared, clawed the air, but it could not withstand what it could not comprehend. For the humble are a terror to the proud, and the broken are more dangerous to darkness than any sword. With a cry that shook the heavens, Heracles wrapped his arms around the beast's throat, not in hatred, but in desperate intercession. "Let my pride die with you," he whispered and tightened his grip, and the lion fell still. Its body crumbled to dust, leaving behind only its hide, once impenetrable, now as soft as cloth. Heracles, breathless and bruised, fell to his knees. Blood ran from his side. His hands trembled, but he smiled, not in triumph, but in relief. The first labor was complete. From the shadows emerged the prophet once more, bearing balm and bread. He said nothing at first, only knelt beside the weary hero and bound his wounds. Then, in a voice soft as rain, "You have not slain a beast. You have slain your past." Heracles looked to the sky. The clouds parted. A single ray of light bathed the valley floor, and for the first time in a generation, a songbird sang. The line of pride was no more, and the man who once lived for glory now walked in grace. Chapter 3. The Hydra of Doubt. Beyond the valley where pride had fallen lay the fetid swamps of Lerna, a place forgotten by both man and map. Here the earth bled poison, the trees twisted like serpents, and the waters reeked of decay. It was said that nothing true could grow there, for the ground itself denied the light. It was here that Heracles was sent next, to face a creature older than memory, feared even by the shadows. The Hydra, not a single beast, but many, a serpent with 9 heads, and with every head struck down, 2 more rose in its place. It was not merely a terror of flesh, but a symbol of the soul's most insidious plague, doubt. Where pride had made Heracles blind, doubt now threatened to make him hollow. He arrived at dusk. The prophet had given no map, only a word, descend. And so he did, into the marshes, where the water clung like oil, and every step pulled him deeper into despair. Fog curled around his ankles. Whispers echoed through the trees, not of demons, but of himself. "You are not forgiven," said one voice. "You will fail again," said another. "You are not worthy," said a third. Heracles pressed on, clutching the lion's hide, now stitched into a cloak around his shoulders. It offered no magic, no protection, but reminded him of who he had chosen to become. He found the Hydra at the heart of the swamp, coiled in the ruins of an ancient altar, its many heads resting in the filth. It did not hiss. It did not charge. It simply opened its eyes, all of them, and stared into Heracles' soul. Then the whispers grew louder. They came not from the beast, but from within. Memories, failures, wounds not yet healed. They surged forth like floodwaters. His family, his sin, the screams of that cursed night. Heracles stumbled, clutching his head. "You will never be clean," hissed the Hydra's central voice, not aloud but in his mind. "No matter how many beasts you kill, the rot will remain." And he believed it. For a moment, he believed it. He fell to his knees. Doubt wrapped around him like vines. He could no longer see the sky. He forgot the prophet. He forgot the light. He forgot grace. The heads of the Hydra rose, slowly, almost pityingly, and moved to strike. But then, a single word, faint as a flame in wind. "Remember." Heracles gasped. It was not a command. It was a gift. He remembered the valley, the lion, the cry to heaven, the moment when strength had failed and mercy had come. He stood, not with rage, not with might, but with faith, and he fought, not with sword or spear, but with truth. Each time a head lunged, he turned its venom with a verse. Each time a lie coiled around his thoughts, he cut it down with remembrance. "The Lord is my refuge and strength," he whispered. "Though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil." The Hydra screeched, and Heracles struck. 1 head down, 2 rose. He struck again, 4. Doubt multiplied. Fear fed on itself. He was surrounded, but then came fire, not from the heavens, but from Heracles' own resolve. He grasped a burning branch from a nearby tree. Strange, that flame could still live in such a place. And with it, he cauterized each wound. Each time he severed a head, he sealed the stump with flame. The screams grew fewer, the heads slower, until silence returned. Smoke rose, the swamp stilled, and the Hydra, once the tyrant of fear, lay lifeless at his feet. Heracles collapsed. He did not smile. He did not weep. He simply breathed. The prophet came again, as always, not with applause, but with understanding. He said nothing at first, only sat beside the hero and placed a hand upon his shoulder. "You fought not the beast," he said at last, "but yourself." Heracles nodded. "I nearly lost." The prophet shook his head. "You nearly surrendered to a lie. But the truth is this: doubt is not your enemy. It is the soil in which faith is planted. What matters is not that you doubted, but that you remembered." A wind passed through the swamp, fresh, clean, impossible, and the trees stood straighter. Heracles rose once more. Bloodied, yes. Scarred, yes. But unshaken. And the road to the next trial opened before him, lined not with thorns, but with lilies blooming in the mire. The Hydra of doubt had fallen, and Heracles walked on, a man made stronger not by certainty, but by grace. Chapter 4. The Hind of Desire. East of the riverlands and north of the mountains lay a forest so old that even the stars had forgotten its name. The trees there whispered secrets in a tongue older than men, and the wind carried scents of memory and longing. It was said that in the heart of that forest dwelled the Hind of Serenia, a creature of impossible beauty, swifter than shadow, with hooves of silver and antlers like woven gold. But Heracles was not sent to slay this creature. He was sent to catch it, for the hind was no enemy of flesh, but of purpose, a spirit of distraction, a symbol of unholy desire, not the hunger of the body, but the longing of the soul to chase after things not meant to be caught. And Heracles, though stronger and wiser than when he entered Lerna's swamp, still bore the heart of a man. And man, above all things, is drawn to desire. He entered the forest at dawn. The birds sang differently here, not with joy, but with seduction. Colors shimmered where they should not. Trees opened to winding paths that led nowhere. Flowers bloomed with unnatural brilliance. It was not a place of darkness, but of enchantment, of beauty that beguiled the senses and lured the soul away from the path. Heracles walked slowly, cloaked in the hide of the lion, each step echoing with caution. He had faced beasts. He had faced lies. But now, he would face something far more dangerous. What? He first saw the hind, just before midday, standing by a stream of water clear as crystal. Its eyes were sapphire, its body flawless, glowing as if it had been carved from starlight. It turned its head, not in fear, but in invitation, and then vanished like mist into the trees. Heracles gave chase, not with hunger, not with wrath, but with purpose. Yet the hind was always a step ahead. He ran for hours, the forest changing with every stride. The path twisted. Flowers opened where none had been. Fruit glistened from low-hanging branches, fruit that whispered his name. He ignored them. He pressed on. But the longer he ran, the more the forest sang to him. Visions danced in the light. Visions of glory, of a throne raised in his honor, of crowds chanting his name. A woman, her face unknown, reached for him with eyes that promised peace. A city where his crimes were forgotten, and his name written in gold. And always the hind just ahead, leading him deeper. Then he stumbled, not on stone or root, but on himself. His breath failed. His heart raced, not from exertion, but from confusion. Why was he chasing? What would he gain? Was this still the path of redemption, or had he already wandered from it? He fell to his knees, and in the silence he heard it, a voice clear and low. Not all beauty is holy. The forest darkened. The hind reappeared, close this time. Heracles looked into its eyes and saw not peace, but possessiveness, a hunger mirrored in his own soul. And he understood, this creature was not meant to be owned. To seize it would be to lose everything else. Desire is not sin, but the desire to possess what God has not given. That is the seed of ruin. Heracles stood. He did not lift his bow. He did not raise his hands. Instead, he whispered, "I release you." The hind froze. Then, for the first time, it approached. Slowly, silently. It bowed its head before him, not as prey, but as a test passed. Then it turned and walked calmly into the woods. Not fleeing, not taunting, free. The forest sighed. The illusions faded. The path became clear. The false fruit withered. The songs silenced. What remained was stillness and peace. The prophet was waiting at the forest's edge. "You did not catch the hind," he said. "No," Heracles replied, "but I stopped chasing." The prophet nodded. "Then you have one." And so Heracles left the forest, not with a trophy, but with truth. That not all things that glitter are good. That not every desire is holy. And that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in pursuit, but in letting go. Chapter 5. The Boar of Wrath. The snows of Mount Erymanthus were as old as the curse that haunted its slopes. Icy winds howled like wailing souls. The sun, when it dared appear, cast no warmth. Upon those frozen heights lived the Erymanthian boar, a monstrous beast of rage and ruin, whose tusks split stone and whose fury melted even the fiercest blizzards. None dared approach it. None, save Heracles. For his next labor was not to defeat wrath, but to bind it, to learn whether anger could be mastered, not through dominance, but through discipline. Heracles began the ascent with heavy breath and heavier thoughts. Each step crunched over snow, but in his mind echoed the sounds of war, the cries of battle, the screams of the innocent, the roar that once rose from his own lips when he gave into rage. He had been a man of fury once, when his strength ruled his soul. Now, as he climbed the mountain, that same fury stirred beneath his ribs, not gone, merely dormant. The higher he climbed, the colder it became. But inside, Heracles burned. He reached a plateau near the peak by twilight, where frost formed like shattered glass upon the rocks. There, at the edge of a cliff, the boar waited. It was unlike any creature Heracles had seen. Towering, bristling, its hide glinted like black ice, and steam rose from its flaring nostrils. Its eyes held no madness, only pain twisted into wrath. This was not a mindless beast. This was rage given form. Heracles approached slowly. The boar snorted, pawed the ground, and charged. The impact shook the mountain. Heracles was flung against a tree, ribs shattering. Blood painted the snow. But he rose, gripping the trunk for balance, and steadied his breath. Not with vengeance, not with hate, but with resolve. The boar charged again. This time, Heracles did not meet it with strength. He dodged, listened, observed. It was wild, yes, but there was rhythm in its fury, a wound beneath the wrath. As it passed, he saw the scar along its flank. Old, deep, made by men. Spears, perhaps. Cruelty. This beast had been hunted, mistreated, turned bitter by the violence of others. It raged because it had been wronged. And in that, Heracles saw himself. He remembered the years of being used as a weapon, as a shield, as a spectacle. The times he had obeyed kings but ignored conscience. The wrath that had built in him, that had one day erupted and stolen all he loved. He knew now, wrath is not born. It is made, but it need not rule. The boar lunged again. This time, Heracles met it head-on, not with fists but with open arms. He grasped the creature's tusks and held firm, not striking, not breaking, simply holding. Snow exploded around them. Ice cracked. Yet Heracles did not waver. He spoke. "I know your pain." The boar thrashed. "I have lived it." The boar roared. "I do not seek your death, only your peace." The boar slowed, breath steaming, muscles quaking, eyes burning, but it did not strike again. Heracles gently released its tusks. The boar stared at him, confused, as if it had never been met with mercy before. Then slowly it bowed its head. The mountain fell silent. Snow drifted softly. The cold no longer bit. And Heracles, instead of binding the beast in chains, fashioned a halter from his own cloak and led it down the mountain. Not as a prisoner, but as a companion. At the base of the slope, the prophet waited by a fire. He looked at the beast and smiled. not with pride, but with understanding. You did not conquer it, he said. No, Heracles replied. I carried its burden. The prophet nodded. And in doing so, you laid down your own. Heracles sat by the fire, the boar resting at his side like a lion at peace. Wrath had not been destroyed, for it is a fire, and fire cannot be slain. But it had been tamed, not by force, but by fellowship. And in its place, Heracles had kindled something stronger. Compassion. Chapter 6. The Stables of the Soul. There are places where the filth of the world is hidden in plain sight, not behind iron gates or cursed mountains, but within the walls of luxury and pride. Such was the kingdom of Augeas. To the common eye, Augeas' realm sparkled with gold and grain. His people dined in excess, and his granaries overflowed. But behind the palace, beyond the vineyards, stood a vast plain of shadow, the royal stables. No man had touched them in 30 years. No servant had dared, for within those stables lived not beasts, but shame. Thousands of oxen had been kept there, sacred by decree and forbidden to be moved or slain. Their waste had piled, year upon year, until the very soil turned black and sour. The air reeked of decay and arrogance. This was no ordinary filth. It was the manifestation of unchecked greed, wealth without conscience, blessing without stewardship. It was here that Heracles was sent next, and he was not to destroy, but to cleanse. The task seemed absurd, not because it was beneath him, but because it was impossible. How could one man purify in a day what had been corrupted for generations? When Heracles arrived, Augeas met him with scorn. The king wore silks dyed with crushed seashells and rings carved from ivory. He laughed at the hero's presence, believing it an insult, that one so mighty should be sent to shovel dung. Clean them, he mocked, and I shall reward you with all your hands can carry. Heracles said nothing. He simply walked to the edge of the stables and looked within. What he saw would break lesser men. Muck piled to the rafters, maggots crawling over matted hay, bones of trampled animals hidden beneath the refuse. And the stench, a stench of rot, of forgotten sin, of blessing turned to curse. He rolled up his sleeves, for this was no humiliation. This was holy work. He labored from sun to sun, but not as others might. He did not waste strength on lifting what could not be carried. Instead, he studied the land, watched the way the sun struck the hills, listened to the murmurs of the earth. And then, with a cry to heaven and a strike of his axe, he broke open the banks of two mighty rivers that flowed near the palace, Alpheus and Punnius, waters as old as the covenant of the flood. The rivers roared. They rushed through the stables like judgment made flesh, sweeping away filth, washing rot from stone, lifting bones from mire. The stables trembled. The palace shook. Augeas cried out in horror as the water surged past his vineyards, but Heracles did not look back. For this was not vengeance. It was redemption. By dusk, the filth was gone. The stables, once symbols of greed and neglect, now shone with golden straw and sweet, clean air. Even the oxen stirred with life anew, their eyes no longer dulled by suffering. Augeas, seeing his sin exposed, tried to revoke his promise. You used the rivers, he spat. You cheated. But Heracles turned to him, calm and unbending. No, I remembered that man is not saved by strength alone, but by wisdom. And water, even floodwater, has always been a tool of grace. He walked away without reward. The prophet waited outside the gates, as he always did, silent, patient, knowing. You have done what no servant dared, he said. I am no servant, Heracles replied. Ah, said the prophet, but you are, and that is your strength. That night, Heracles slept by the riverbank, listening to the quiet song of the waters as they carried away a kingdom's shame. He dreamed not of glory, but of rain, clean, steady, soft, and he awoke with peace in his bones. Chapter 7. The Birds of the Mind. Beyond the marshes of Arcadia, past the cypress groves and silver lakes, stretched a land known only in whispers, the Stymphalian fields. At first glance, it was a place of beauty, green meadows kissed by mist, reeds swaying like dancers in the wind, and the hush of peace upon the waters. But beauty, as Heracles had learned, could be a mask. His seventh labor brought him here, to drive out the birds of Stymphalus, no ordinary fowl, but creatures birthed from fear and fed by thought. Their feathers were of bronze, sharper than spearheads. Their wings sounded like screams. And their song was ruin. For they did not feed on flesh, but on the soul. They lived in the high reeds and deep mists, waiting for men to pass through. And when they heard footsteps, they rose with terrible song, not of battle cries or curses, but of doubt. You are not enough. You will fail again. You will never be clean. Heracles walked into the mist at dawn, alone but for his breath and prayer. The ground was soft, waterlogged, deceptive. Every step sank deeper, as if the earth wished to consume him. And then they came. Hundreds, thousands, wings of thunder, eyes like coals, feathers glittering with sharpness and lies. They circled above him and began to sing. The air pulsed with their voices, and Heracles staggered. He had faced beasts of muscle, monsters of scale and tusk. But never had he felt a pain like this, a warfare not of body, but of spirit. The bird spoke in the tongue of his own thoughts, echoing his guilt, whispering his failures, chanting the names of the dead he had loved and lost. His knees struck the mud. He clenched his ears, but their song was not heard with the body. It was felt within. You are unworthy of redemption. You are the lion's skin, but it cannot cover your shame. You fight for heaven, but you belong to the dust. Heracles wept, not from weakness, but from the weight of truth twisted into torment. The birds fed on this. They grew bolder, swooping closer, slicing the air with wings of metal. And then a memory stirred, not of conquest, not of strength, but of a voice, soft, scarred, sacred. This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. He had heard it once in a dream, the voice that called to the desert, the voice that echoed over Jordan's water. Not to him, but to another. Yet it was enough. Heracles stood. He reached to his belt and withdrew the rattle Hephaestus had forged, a gift of sound, not of steel. It was not a weapon, but a call. Forged of divine metal and holy purpose, it rang with clarity, with joy, with truth. He raised it high and shook it. A sound like pure light burst forth. The air cracked. The birds shrieked, recoiling, for this was no ordinary noise. It was music free of lies. It rang with faith. It rang with the promise that not all thoughts are to be trusted, and that not every voice is holy. The birds scattered. Some fell, stunned by the purity. Others fled into the high clouds, never to return. The sky, once blackened, cleared, and the mist fell silent. Heracles stood alone once more. But something in him had changed. He now knew that the greatest battleground was the mind, and that the loudest voices are often false. He walked out of the marsh with slow steps and quiet heart. The prophet waited by a dying tree, watching the clouds part. "Did you slay them?" he asked. "No," Heracles said. "I silenced them." "And what did they say?" "Everything I feared," Heracles whispered. "And none of it was true." The prophet smiled, then handed him bread and water, and said nothing more. That night, Heracles ate beneath the stars, and for the first time in many moons, the silence within him was not empty. It was holy. Chapter 8. The Cretan Bull. The island of Crete, wrapped in the embrace of endless waves and crowned by jagged cliffs, held a secret born from the depths of divine wrath. The Cretan bull, a creature unlike any other, was no mere beast of muscle and might. It was the living fury of tempest and defiance, a symbol of rebellion against the natural order, sent as both punishment and challenge to mortals who dared to stray from the path of righteousness. Heracles stood upon the rocky shore as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land, and the air was thick with the salt of the sea and the electric promise of an approaching storm. Tales told by sailors spoke of a great bull whose breath was fire, whose eyes glowed with the fury of the gods themselves. Villages had been razed, fields trampled, and innocent lives caught in the wake of its rampage. The people of Crete feared the beast as a living tempest, unstoppable, relentless, unholy. Yet, the labor set before Heracles was not to slay the bull, but to capture it alive and bring it back to Eurystheus. The task was far greater than mere strength. It demanded patience, faith, and a heart that could confront the chaos within as well as without. As Heracles ventured inland, the earth beneath his feet trembled, as if the island itself warned him of the challenge to come. The wind howled through the olive trees, and distant thunder echoed, a herald of the storm within the bull's soul. The hero moved with deliberate calm, his every step a prayer whispered in the quiet between the crashing waves. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and from the shadows emerged the Cretan bull. Its massive form was wreathed in steam and fire, hooves pounding the earth with such force that the very stones cracked beneath its fury. The creature's eyes blazed like twin suns, fiery orbs filled with wrath and untamed power. Its breath scorched the air, and every snort released sparks that danced like fallen stars. Heracles faced the beast, not with sword or spear, but with steady hands and an unyielding spirit. He remembered the lessons of his past labors, that brute force alone was never the answer. Instead, he drew upon a deeper power, the strength of faith and the resolve to bring order to chaos. The bull charged, a living storm unleashed upon the land. Heracles dodged and weaved through the fury, his cloak singed but his spirit unscathed. The battle was a dance of wills, the beast representing pride and rebellion, the hero embodying humility and divine grace. Hours passed, the sun setting to a blood-red horizon as Heracles continued to pursue the raging tempest. Yet, with each passing moment, he did not seek to crush the beast, but to calm it. He spoke softly, his voice a balm to the storm, a prayer to the heavens for peace. Gradually, the bull's fury began to wane. Its breath, once fire, cooled to gentle steam. The wild blaze in its eyes softened to a weary glow. The tempest had been tamed, not by violence, but by mercy. With ropes woven from faith and patience, Heracles bound the bull, not as a conqueror, but as a shepherd guiding a lost lamb home. The beast knelt before him, surrendering not out of defeat, but out of newfound trust. He led the Cretan bull back to the shore where ships awaited, ready to carry the living symbol of divine power and mercy back to the mortal realm. The islanders watched in awe and newfound hope, witnessing a testament to the truth that even the wildest storms can be calmed by grace. As the ship sailed away from Crete, Heracles looked back at the island, a place forever changed by the gentle hand of faith. He knew the battle was more than physical. It was a reflection of the war within every soul, the struggle to tame pride and rebellion through the quiet power of repentance and humility. That night, beneath a sky sparkling with stars, Heracles knelt in prayer, thankful for the labor that taught him the greatest victory was over oneself. Chapter 9. The Mares of Madness. In the shadowed plains beyond the horizon, where sunlight struggled to break through the heavy clouds, there roamed the Mares of Diomedes, fierce, wild creatures birthed from madness and cruelty, their very existence a reflection of the chaos that dwells within the human heart. These are no ordinary horses. Their hooves thundered like rolling storms, their eyes burned with a fiery madness, and their breath carried the stench of terror and despair. Legends told that they fed not on grass, but on flesh, the flesh of the innocent and the wicked alike. Heracles approached the barren land, the air thick with the bitter scent of decay and violence. The ground was cracked and lifeless, as if the madness had poisoned the very soil beneath his feet. Villagers had long abandoned these cursed plains, their whispers filled with dread and hopelessness. It was here that Heracles was called to fulfill his ninth labor, to capture the savage Mares and bring them under the dominion of grace. As he stepped into the shadowed field, a cold wind swept across the landscape, carrying the distant, frantic neighs of the maddened beasts. The Mares sensed his presence, their wild eyes flaring with suspicion and rage. They galloped toward him, a tidal wave of madness unleashed, their manes wild like flames and their nostrils flaring with savage hunger. The clash was immediate and violent. Heracles dodged their furious charges, feeling the thunder of hooves and the sharp sting of their biting teeth. But this battle was not fought with brute force alone. It was a war of wills, a contest between chaos and order, madness and mercy. He remembered the faces of those lost to madness, the innocent children who wandered lost in their own minds, the broken souls consumed by rage, and the despair that had once nearly claimed him. These mares were the embodiment of that same torment, a reflection of the darkness he had battled within himself. Heracles called upon a strength beyond muscle, the strength of compassion. He spoke softly, whispering prayers of healing and peace into the wind. His voice cut through the cacophony of rage, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. Slowly, the mares faltered. Their wild eyes blinked, confusion replacing fury. The fire in their breath dimmed to a gentle warmth. One by one, they lowered their heads, surrendering not to chains but to the gentle hands of grace. Heracles bound the mares with ropes forged from faith, not to imprison, but to guide them away from the wasteland of despair and toward a land where healing and hope might bloom. As he led them across the barren plains, the earth beneath their feet began to soften. Grass pushed through cracked soil, and the sky above cleared from storm clouds to a radiant blue. The madness that had once consumed these creatures was quelled by the power of redemption. At the edge of the plains, a prophet awaited him, eyes filled with quiet awe and deep understanding. "You have tamed not beasts of flesh alone," the prophet said, voice steady like the earth beneath their feet. "You have tamed the madness that dwells in every soul." Heracles nodded, feeling the heavy chains of his own past loosen. "And in taming them, I have tamed myself." That night, beneath a canopy of stars shining with divine promise, Heracles knelt and offered thanks. The labor was more than a test of strength. It was a journey into the darkest corners of the human spirit, a reminder that even the wildest storms of the mind can be calmed by the light of faith and mercy. The mares of madness were no longer symbols of destruction, but of hope, a testament to the healing power of grace and the enduring courage it takes to confront the shadows within. Chapter 10. The Girdle of the Amazon Queen. Beyond the mountains and the vast wilderness where mortal feet seldom tread, there lay the kingdom of the Amazons, a fierce tribe of warrior women, descended from the gods and bound by an unbreakable code of honor and strength. Their queen, Hippolyta, was a figure woven from legend itself, her courage radiant and her spirit untamed. Upon her waist she bore the sacred girdle, a gift from the goddess Artemis, symbolizing not only her sovereignty but the divine power granted to her people. Heracles' 10th labor was unlike the battles that had come before. This was no fight against monstrous beasts or insurmountable odds of nature. It was a journey into the heart of a proud culture, a test of diplomacy and humility. To claim the girdle was to win the trust of the Amazons, to prove himself worthy in a way that brute strength alone could never achieve. The journey to the Amazon lands was perilous in itself. Heracles traversed dense forests where the trees whispered secrets of the past, their leaves shimmering as though alive with magic. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, but also tinged with an ancient tension. He knew the queen's warriors would not surrender their sacred treasure without fierce defense. Upon entering the realm, Heracles was met not with war cries, but with cautious silence. The Amazon warriors circled him like shadows, their eyes sharp as arrows, their movements fluid and dangerous. At the center of this fierce assembly stood Hippolyta, her presence commanding and regal. Her gaze met his, steady and unyielding. "You come for my girdle," she said, her voice both a challenge and an invitation. "But strength is not won by force alone." Heracles bowed his head respectfully. "I seek not to take by might, but to honor the bond that the divine wills. Let us speak as equals." Their conversations stretched long into the twilight, weaving through stories of valor, sacrifice, and faith. Hippolyta's respect for Heracles grew as she saw beyond the hero's strength to the humility in his heart. But whispers of dissent stirred among the Amazon warriors. Fear and misunderstanding broke the fragile peace as arrows were loosed in haste. In the chaos that followed, Heracles fought not with fury, but with a protective grace. He deflected blows aimed at Hippolyta, his every movement guided by mercy. The battle, though fierce, held no true hatred, only the clash of distrust. Seeing the truth in his actions, Hippolyta stepped forward, offering her girdle freely, not as a token of defeat, but as a symbol of trust and alliance. With the girdle fastened around his waist, Heracles felt the weight of responsibility heavier than before. This prize was more than a piece of armor. It was a testament to the power of respect, understanding, and faith over mere might. As he departed, the forest seemed to breathe a quiet blessing, the winds carrying the promise that unity, not conflict, could shape the fate of men and gods alike. In that sacred moment, Heracles realized that true power lies not in conquering others, but in conquering fear and embracing compassion. Chapter 11. The Cattle of Geryon. Beyond the sun-baked coast where the sea meets the burning earth, across vast deserts shimmering with heat waves, lay the distant island of Erythea. This was no ordinary place. It was a realm where myths breathed, and where the monstrous Geryon, a titan of legend with 3 bodies conjoined at the waist, guarded his precious herd of red cattle. These cattle were not just beasts of burden or sustenance. They were sacred creatures, their coats gleaming like molten copper, their eyes gleaming with an eerie intelligence. To seize them was a task that tested the very core of a man's courage, endurance, and faith. Heracles' journey to this far-flung island was an odyssey in itself, crossing seas whipped by relentless storms, under skies scorched by an unforgiving sun. The air grew thin and charged with an almost electric tension, as if the world itself held its breath, awaiting the outcome of this divine trial. When at last Heracles set foot on Erythea's scorched soil, he was met with a sight both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Geryon stood towering, a 3-bodied colossus whose voices thundered in unison like the crashing waves of a storm. Each head bore a crown of twisted horns, eyes burning with defiance and fury, muscles rippling beneath bronze-like skin as hard as the armor of the gods. "You dare come for my cattle?" His triple voices boomed, shaking the very earth beneath them. "You shall find only death and despair." Heracles, undaunted, met the giant's fierce gaze. "I come not for conquest alone, but by the will of the Almighty. The cattle are needed to fulfill a purpose greater than might." The battle was cataclysmic. Geryon struck with the force of 3 warriors, each blow threatening to shatter mountains. Yet Heracles moved with divine grace, his lion's skin shielding him as he dodged and parried, a tempest of strength and resolve. The clash of their might echoed across the barren landscape like thunder, dust rising in great clouds to shroud the battlefield in a haze of struggle. In the midst of the fight, Heracles called upon his faith, channeling a strength beyond flesh, a light that burned through the darkness of the giant's rage. With a mighty cry, he struck true, bringing Geryon to his knees, not by hatred, but by righteous purpose. Subduing the giant, Heracles rounded up the sacred cattle. Their eyes, once wild and fiery, now held a calm that spoke of peace and acceptance. The journey back across the desolate wastes tested his endurance, hunger gnawing at his bones and thirst parching his lips. But his spirit remained unbroken, sustained by the belief that his quest was a vessel of divine will. On his return, Heracles was greeted by the prophet who had set him on this path. "You have done more than bring beasts," the prophet said softly, eyes shining with awe. "You have brought a symbol of hope, a reminder that through faith, even the impossible can be made real." Heracles bowed, his heart full. Let this journey teach all who hear it that strength is a gift when wielded with humility, and that redemption awaits those who walk in faith. Chapter 12. The Apples of the Hesperides. Far beyond the known lands, where the sky seems to melt into endless horizons and the winds whisper secrets from the dawn of time, lay the mysterious garden of the Hesperides. This sacred place was said to be the final resting ground of the golden apples, fruits gifted by the gods themselves, shimmering with divine light and promising eternal life to those deemed worthy. But such blessings never come unguarded. The garden was watched over by the fierce dragon Ladon, a serpent with countless shining scales and eyes that burned with an ancient, watchful fire. Heracles stood on the threshold of this enchanted realm, the weight of his 12 labors heavy upon his shoulders. This was his penultimate trial, a test not just of strength or cunning, but of faith and humility. The journey to the garden had been long and perilous, filled with unseen dangers and the gnawing fear that no mortal might claim the fruit without losing his soul. He approached quietly, the air thick with the fragrance of blossoms and the hum of divine magic. The trees bore their golden bounty in quiet splendor, each apple pulsing with a light that seemed to hold the very breath of heaven. But before he could reach them, Ladon emerged, a massive serpent coiled protectively around the tree, its eyes gleaming like stars in the night. Heracles, knowing that this battle could not be fought with sword or spear alone, knelt in reverence and prayed for guidance. His words, humble and steady, rose like a prayer to the Almighty. Grant me strength not to conquer, but to serve, wisdom not to take by force, but to accept what is given. At that moment, the Titan Atlas appeared, burdened by the heavens themselves. Heracles offered to bear this great weight, freeing Atlas to fetch the golden apples from the garden. With careful hands, Heracles lifted the celestial weight, feeling the crushing weight of divine responsibility. Atlas, once freed, returned swiftly with the apples, but tempted by freedom, he sought to leave Heracles with the burden. Yet Heracles, wise beyond mere strength, counseled the Titan with gentle words of duty and honor, reminding him that even the strongest must uphold their divine roles. With the apples secured, Heracles returned the heavens to Atlas and prepared to leave the garden. Yet the true treasure was not the fruit itself, but the lessons learned, the power of faith, the grace of humility, and the strength found in serving a higher purpose. As he made his way back, the apples glowing softly in his hands, Heracles felt a peace settle within his heart, a peace that would outlast the fleeting rewards of earthly triumphs. Upon his return, the apples were not presented as trophies, but as symbols of hope and redemption, blessings to inspire all who sought the light amidst darkness. And under the vast night sky, filled with stars that sang the songs of creation, Heracles knelt once more, his spirit renewed and ready to face the final trial. Chapter 13. The Capture of Cerberus. Beneath the world where shadows dwell, beyond the reach of sun and star, lies the realm of the dead, Hades' kingdom. It is a land wrapped in eternal twilight, where souls wander like mist and the silence is broken only by the distant echo of sorrow. At the gates of this shadowed domain stood Cerberus, the monstrous three-headed hound, a beast born of darkness and fury, tasked with guarding the threshold between life and death. His snarling heads, each with teeth like sharpened daggers, and his serpent's tail made him a terror that no mortal dared challenge. Heracles, burdened by the enormity of his final labor, stood before the entrance to this forsaken realm, his heart steady but his spirit aware of the profound trial ahead. He carried no sword, no shield, only the strength given by faith and the lion's skin that had become his mantle. His task was not to kill, but to capture, to bring forth Cerberus from the underworld without shedding blood. With a solemn prayer whispered under his breath, Heracles stepped into the darkness, the cold air biting at his skin and the weight of countless lost souls pressing on his soul. The path was treacherous, winding through caverns of despair, past rivers of sorrow, and halls echoing with the lamentations of the dead. When he reached the gates, Cerberus charged with a fury born of the abyss, each head snapping and snarling. But Heracles met the beast with calm resolve, his faith steady like a beacon in the dark. He wrestled the creature with a strength that was both fierce and gentle, calming the fury with his steady hands and unwavering spirit. The battle was not one of violence, but of trust and submission. Cerberus, sensing Heracles' divine purpose and unyielding heart, ceased his attacks and allowed himself to be led from the underworld. The journey back was heavy with silence. The beast subdued, yet alive, a living symbol of the boundary between life and death. Emerging once more into the light of the mortal world, Heracles carried not just a captive beast, but a profound understanding that even the darkest fears can be overcome through faith and compassion. Before Eurystheus, he presented Cerberus, not as a trophy of conquest, but as a testament to the power of mercy and divine grace. The final labor was complete, yet Heracles knew his greatest triumph was the transformation within, a soul tempered by trial, shining with the light of redemption. That night, beneath a canopy of stars, Heracles knelt in prayer, the echoes of the underworld fading, but the lessons etched forever in his heart. Chapter 14. The Cleansing of the Augean Stables. In the fertile plains where the rivers meet and life flourishes, there lay the vast stables of King Augeas. These were no ordinary stables, but the home to thousands of cattle, symbols of wealth and power. Yet, for decades, the stables had been abandoned, left to fester in filth and decay, a monument to neglect and corruption. The stench was unbearable, a blight upon the land and its people. Heracles' labor was not to wrestle a beast or battle a god, but to cleanse this overwhelming filth, a task as great in spirit as in form, a challenge of faith, ingenuity, and perseverance. Arriving at the scene, Heracles felt the weight of the challenge before him. The stables were a pit of despair, filled with years of accumulated waste, poison to the earth and soul alike. It was a place where neglect had bred sickness and despair, much like the moral decay that had taken hold in the hearts of men blinded by greed. Heracles knelt at the banks of the rivers Alpheus and Punius, praying for divine guidance. His plan was simple yet audacious. Rather than clean by hand, he would redirect the mighty rivers to flood the stables, washing away the filth in a powerful surge of pure, living water. With faith guiding his hands, Heracles labored to carve new channels, a feat that called upon strength, skill, and unyielding hope. As the rivers burst forth, their waters roared through the stables, sweeping away decades of decay in a rushing flood that cleansed not only the earth, but the spirit of all who witnessed it. King Augeas, blinded by pride and greed, refused to honor his promise to reward Heracles for the impossible task. Yet, Heracles' labor stood as a testimony that faith and action could overcome even the deepest corruption. The cleansing of the Augean stables was more than a physical purification. It was a spiritual renewal, a parable of hope that no darkness is too deep to be washed away by the river of repentance and grace. As the waters receded, the earth breathed anew, vibrant and ready to sustain life once more. Heracles, standing amidst the renewed fields, knelt in solemn prayer, giving thanks for the strength to bring light where there had been only darkness. The lesson was clear and eternal. True strength lies not just in might, but in the courage to cleanse, to heal, and to renew. Chapter 15. The Return and Redemption. The journey that had begun in shadows and trials now approached its destined end, beneath a sky vast and eternal, where stars shimmered like the promises of ages past. Heracles, once a man burdened by sorrow and torment, had walked a path forged by faith, struggle, and divine grace. The 12 labors, each a trial of strength, spirit, and resolve, had transformed him into a figure both mortal and transcendent, a hero whose true victory lay not in conquest, but in redemption. As he traveled back toward the familiar lands of Tiryns, The air itself seemed to pulse with the echoes of his deeds. Villagers emerged from humble homes and bustling marketplaces, their faces alight with reverence and hope. Mothers lifted children high to glimpse the man who had battled beasts, the storms of madness, and even death itself. Elders bowed in quiet gratitude, seeing in Heracles the embodiment of faith made flesh. At the gates of the city awaited Eurystheus, the king who had first cast these labors upon Heracles' shoulders. But the scene was not one of judgment or condemnation. Instead, it was a meeting of respect and acknowledgement, the recognition of a journey completed not in vain, but as a testament to the divine will. "You have done what none believed possible," Eurystheus said, his voice softened by awe. "You have shown us the strength of the spirit that walks with God's favor." Heracles, clad in the lion's skin that had come to symbolize his enduring courage, met the king's gaze. "The strength was never mine alone," he replied. "It was granted by a higher power, carried in faith and humility through every trial." That evening, beneath the vast canopy of night, Heracles gathered those who had stood by him, the friends, the watchers, the believers. Around a fire that crackled like the breath of the divine, he spoke not of glory, but of the lessons learned. That true power is found in mercy, that courage is born of compassion, and that redemption is a journey open to all who walk in faith. He told tales not of battles won by might alone, but of fears conquered through grace, of madness quelled by love, of burdens lifted by forgiveness. His voice wove a tapestry of hope, shining through the darkest nights. As the flames flickered and the stars above sang silent hymns, Heracles knelt in prayer, grateful for a journey that had changed not only himself, but the world around him. The 12 labors were complete, yet his story was far from over. For in every heart willing to believe, the spirit of Heracles' trials lived on, a beacon shining through the darkest times, a reminder that with faith, no trial is too great, no darkness too deep. He had been tested in body, mind, and soul, and emerged not just a hero, but a man redeemed. And in that redemption, he found eternal victory.